We turn now to the 17-year-old expat New Zealand boy who'd been held for 4 months in an Australian detention centre. RNZ broke the news of his release last night. Acting Prime Minister Winston Peters confirmed it this morning. But the case remains controversial. It was an adult detention centre and the boy is 17. His release was ordered by the Australian Immigration Appeals Tribunal, and Peter Dutton, Australia's Minister for Immigration and Border Protection, has frequently overruled the tribunal. Rebecca Holt, herself an expat Kiwi, now working as a journalist in Australia, has frequently been to the detention centre in Melbourne and became involved in the boy's case once she learnt he was there. Wasn't known for a while that there was a 17-year-old in this facility. When she discovered he was being released, she went to meet him, but even then, whether or not he would actually be released, given the power of Mr Dutton, remained in doubt.
Yes, and I knew that there would be some issues around what could happen yesterday. The young man we're talking about, he wanted me to go and get him immediately when he was told he was released. He was going to be put on a plane back to his family in New South Wales yesterday afternoon. So I knew that there'd be an escort for him to go back, and I wasn't sure whether he'd be allowed to be released to me. His guardian was okay for that to happen, but we couldn't get the paperwork to make that happen, and it was getting very close to the time of the flight. Once I got there and he was released and we met in the reception area, it was very close to when the plane was going to leave. So we made the decision. I said to him, look, it's all right. You get in the van and I'll follow. I'll drive behind so you don't feel like you're on your own.
Can we talk about this place, Rebecca? And I don't want to imperil your access because you are there all the time and you need to be able to get in. So feel free to not answer this question. But is this detention centre an appropriate place for a 17-year-old boy to be?
This is in no way an appropriate place for a young person to be. Unfortunately, what happens to asylum seekers in Australia who are kept in detention centres, that they are treated, probably the most understandable comparison is that they're treated like people who are in a prison in New Zealand. So they're treated like they're in a high security prison in New Zealand. That would be a good comparison for people.
And so it's potentially a brutalising environment. What sort of state is he in now that he's out? Has he survived it relatively unscathed, or is it not easy to say that?
I think it's too soon for us to see what the impact of this has had. He had some really low points in the last month. We spent a lot of time on the phone. Sometimes he would call me very late at night, and you know, when you're a parent and you have your own teenagers and you know that someone's very vulnerable, and you do pick up those calls. So we had some conversations, and I have said publicly I was really, really worried about his mental health, and he did say to me several times, more than several times, that he was struggling. So the relief yesterday that he was released is just huge.
I guess the question now is where to next? And once again, we don't want to imperil his situation in any way, and we want to be cognizant of the particular character of Peter Dutton, who gets to make all sorts of decisions on a fairly personal and subjective basis. But is there an expectation that he will be able to stay in Australia?
I'm aware that Minister Dutton's made some comments earlier today. I won't comment on those, but unfortunately, New Zealand teenagers in Australia don't have the same access to systems of justice or social welfare, those kind of systems that Australian teenagers living in New Zealand have. So, a lot of your listeners will be aware of that there's an indiscrepancy there. Going forward for this young man, we just have to wait and see what happens. And it's very nerve-wracking.
That's Rebecca Holt, who has been covering the story and has met the boy and been to the detention centre.